You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. It's interesting because we haven't had availability to see practice every day, but what we have seen has been more than what we typically do. So if I asked you so far through a week, what is your maybe biggest takeaway or takeaways, where would you start?
I think probably just kind of, and this isn't new, right? And I always preface this, but first week, not too much is really getting figured out. But still, I do think just the offensive line shuffling has been kind of one of the more interesting things to follow. And it's not new. They were doing it in the spring, but still, Anthony Bradford, for example, Garrett Dellinger, Marlon Martinez, they all missed the majority or all of spring. So really to see, Bradford right now looking like he's taking first-team right tackle reps, Garrett Dellinger taking first-team center reps, it's telling and it's interesting because it shows what they think of their talent. And I think it's such a coach talk thing, but getting the best five linemen on the field really literally seems to be the case this year, where Garrett Dellinger's a guy they're obviously been very high on, former top 100 recruit. They've always liked him. If theoretically he really knows how to play center and he's ready, that is such a huge win, right? To be able to be like, oh, shoot, this guy might be the second best lineman, period, and you're filling a huge hole. Now you feel good about, say, Frazier at right guard and Bradford at tackle. And I thought it was interesting how Kelly said he's been pairing Bradford and Frazier on the right because they're interchangeable, because they could theoretically flip one to guard and one to tackle. So I just think the whole moving around has just been fascinating to follow. And what a world we live in that the true freshman left tackle, Will Campbell, is the only sure thing there really is on the line.
Isn't that bizarre? But you know what?
Yeah.
You know what's odd, Brody, is a year ago, the narrative year ago on the offensive line, man, they got everybody back. Remember, like Jaquelin came back, and Ingram came back, and Hines came back. They got everybody back. Shanahan was back. But the conversation that we had last year in the preseason was just because you got everybody back from a line that wasn't very good doesn't mean you're better, right? But now You're replacing everybody. So would you say at this point, if you even remember, would you say you're more confident in that group a year ago at this time or now?
Yeah, it's such a good question because you're absolutely right. And then, by the way, I forget who did it, but there's been some really good data analysis done on O-line's actually not a position that returning production matters as much as people think it would. And it's not one of those obvious correlators. So I think you're right. And I'm really not lying when I say I think this year I have more optimism. Now, and I'm a broken record here, but the way I keep putting it is I feel like the floor is higher on this line than it was, the past 2 years or so. I like the floor. I think they have 8, 9 guys who they feel like they can play down to the interchangeable thing and all that. I like a lot of the pieces. I just have literally no idea what the ceiling is. Like the ceiling might not be that high because you literally don't only know one starter. You don't really know if any of these guys are going to wow you, but I do like the pieces. I do think it's worth noting that I saw improvement in the offensive line that second half of working with Brad Davis last year. So that should also give a little optimism. They might turn a corner in year 2. So I'm in no world going to say I think this line's a strength, but I do weirdly have more optimism that it's going to be at least, like that C- this year than I did last year.
It makes sense. What about quarterback? It seems as though, again, a limited scale that we've seen, that if it's Daniels, Nuss, Daniels, whatever, those guys are 1 and 2. Do you feel like Myles Brennan is not in the mix?
Yeah, it's one of those things I think you always have to tiptoe around, but things can change, and I hate always coming out too strong on these things, but that has been most of the word I've heard, throughout this lately, is that it does seem like it's more Nussmeier and Daniels, and that Nussmeier is the one everyone talks about from camp and spring and summer as the guy who has that it factor, but Daniels, of course, has that just extreme running that no one else really has, and that, again, this always could turn around because they do value trust. They do value someone who's not going to turn the ball over. But the word has just kind of been that it seems like Brennan is kind of a little bit back there in third place. And, it's going to be interesting. Tomorrow's going to be interesting because, this isn't big news or anything, but, I've got Garrett Nussmeier kind of banged up his ankle, I believe, a little bit yesterday. So I'm not sure if he's going to be okay. He's fine. But I don't know if he's going to play tomorrow. So maybe it gives us a better chance to see Brennan and Daniels out there. But, yeah, so to your question, that is kind of the sense I've got.
Brody Miller's with us. He's on Twitter at Brody A. Miller. Of course, you read his stuff at The Athletic. Anything else on offense that you have found notable so far?
Just the very low scale of what's notable. But, I just think Malik Neighbors becoming a slot receiver is just kind of an interesting thing to follow because, he kind of made his name last year on those kind of leap ball, jumping over defender catches, and he's really good at them. And he talked to us the other day about kind of, the staff decided it wasn't his decision, but to move him inside, and that he beat kind of that mismatch on the inside. So I just think that's something interesting to follow that, he could really be an interesting guy there.
Let's flip it over and talk about the defensive side. It's hard to tell with linemen when you're just seeing them hit sleds and things like that. But eye test, the defensive line passes it. I would assume you would agree. Any one in particular that you're most curious to see what role they fill and how this year?
Yeah. The true answer is I am just all in on Mason Smith. Holy crap, breakout year. I just think it's going to be one of those, by the end of this year, he is a Bednar candidate or, one of the best linemen in the SEC. So I am just really excited to watch, just what Matt House has in mind, how much he moves around, or does he stay in that spot and just dominate? I don't know. I think the thing I'm just so fascinated by, and I might just be completely wrong on this, but it's just that thing, and I think I might have said this to you on the show before, but Jaquelin Roy is simultaneously a first-round prospect, a guy who is on award list, and theoretically in a competition at nose tackle. And I think there's something really interesting there where you wouldn't think of him as the most natural nose. He's a pretty athletic D tackle. Jacobian Guillory is probably more of a natural nose type, but it's you're not going to. Does that mean there's a scenario where Jaquelin Roy doesn't start? And to be clear, that's highlighting the strength of this D line. But I just really, really am intrigued to see what they do with Roy because he's a first-round talent who, I'm not exactly sure what his role is.
Well, to that point, look at B.J. Ojulari. I mean, he's we've all thought of him as an end opposite Ali Gay, but the other day when we were out there, he was working with the linebackers. So, and Ojulari essentially said that, didn't he? That he's kind of working more of a stand-up role. So, are we to believe we're going to see more 3-4 with Ojulari standing up?
Yeah, as much as they've said, we're multiple, everything they've ever shown us, which I'm sure there's a lot behind, but everything they've ever shown us is 3-4 with Ojulari as the outside linebackers. And Ojulari's always in that individual group with him, Xavier Carter, Desmond Little, which are the edge rushers. So, I think the plan is for Ojulari to be a stand-up out to OLB. And to his credit, when Durante Jones kind of was actually given the keys the end of last year, you did see Ojulari play a little more stand-up outside linebacker, and looked really good doing it. So there's no doubt he has it in him, and you could argue that's actually going to maybe meet his potential more because he is so athletic.
Brody, most in the secondary, most to gain, most to lose in the scrimmage tomorrow?
Oof. Just tricky question because in a lot of ways I'm I don't know who's losing a job, but I really want to watch Sevyn Banks and Jarrett Bernard-Converse because I think it's fair actually to argue they're the two most important transfers in this entire team, and the two guys we haven't seen anything of, two guys with little injury questions, all that stuff. So I don't know if they have much to lose. I think if both those guys are just solid, they're going to be the starters. It's fine. But I think that's what I'm following the most. But there is an argument that the safety battle does have something to lose in game because they do have three starters back there in Foucha, Jay Ward, and Major Burns. I am intrigued to see kind of how those guys shake up.
And that, look, I mean, you want to talk about Burns, Jay Ward, Foucha, Brooks, and then you could even throw in a guy who played at the end of the season last year in Sage Ryan and sort of that nickel role, sort of a nickel safety role. I mean, you got five dudes back there kind of battling over two or maybe three spots. It's for as much as we thought about that secondary because of the turnover, their numbers there may be as deep as anywhere on the team. Would you agree?
Especially in that middle area, right? The nickel safety area. Yeah, it is loaded. The idea that you could theoretically, it's the outside corner that I think concerns are valid. Because, well, for example, both Banks and Converse have injury issues at times. You know, if one of those guys goes down, who knows how good Mekhi Garner is? And then, you know, who's next? Demarius McGee. So I think the outside stuff is concerning. But to your exact point of how deep they are in that middle, I think what they would actually do is Greg Brooks would go out to the outside. He'd be a perfectly good outside corner, and you still have Sage Ryan, to your point, at nickel. So, yeah, I think that middle, that group that works with Kerry Cooks is fantastic, but outside corner is just kind of thin.
You thought over under 7 yet?
Yeah, I hate it's so low that I do think over. I think 8's been my pick for most of the year because it's like you think of it, if you literally go game by game, just literal. LSU is in theory probably at least a slight marginal favorite in 10 games. I'd say. I think so, maybe 9, but and I don't think they go 10-2, but I think I think this is going to be a team that they can win those tough games. They can win some really tough games, maybe lose one they shouldn't. 8-4 has always been my thing. But I'm also the guy that's been too high on them each of the last 2 years.
Hey, look, man. The last thing we'll get you out of here. The thing that maybe is the most intriguing is the Brian Kelly factor, right? There's this number being thrown out there that as a favorite, he's won 40 of his last 41 games at Notre Dame.
Wow.
So maybe are we not emphasizing enough the importance of having a coach in there that's going to be able to maximize this talent?
I think it's a really good point. I think that's absolutely something, it's been like my obnoxious, boring thing, and I believe yours as well. But just reliability and sustainability is what makes great programs. And I think there is something to it. Just a guy who knows how to win a football game in those 50-50 things. I would love to go through that data because I wonder how much context there is most of the games they're favored might be like Boston College or, a struggling USC or something. I'm just curious. I have no idea. But, because they do kind of have a top-heavy than bottom-heavy schedule. But, yeah, I am with you. I think you're going to see an increase in the I don't know how to put it, just the less mistakes, I think is the better way to put it under Kelly.
You mean they'll actually get plays in and not have the quarterback looking at the sideline for plays?
I really don't think we've given enough credit to how insane that was. That was a year-long problem. That was bonkers.
Brody, we saw them calling timeouts coming out of kickoffs.
Coming out of timeouts, I think.
Probably.
I think there was one time there was a timeout. Yeah, it was wild.
Yes, they were very, very poorly coached. And that is going to improve. I don't think anybody doubts that's going to improve. How much does that factor into the win-loss column? That will be a fascinating storyline to watch. Brody Miller, you can follow along. He's on Twitter at Brody A. Miller. Read his stuff at The Athletic. We appreciate it, man. See you out there tomorrow.
Thanks always, man. Take care.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.